Good to see you.
Good, how are you?
Good. One day I'll be back. Very quiet.
Citizen stands, we start.
Hello and welcome. This is the panel on children's literature, resilience, and social justice. We have people here in the sanctuary, and we also have people watching online. I'm Alice Welbourne. I was a school psychologist in Transylvania County Schools for many years, and now I teach educational psychology once a year at Brevard College. And here we have Laura Leatherwood, who was a special education teacher for many years in Transylvania County Schools, and she is now the reading specialist and coordinator of tutors at Rise and Shine Freedom School. And we have BETSY Burrowes, who is a professor of education at Brevard College. She also runs the teacher education program, and in her former life, she was a high school English teacher. And we have ERIKA Brock, who is the children's librarian at Transylvania County Public Library. And we have Kevin LAUSCH, who has been a youth minister and a summer camp administrator, and he is now the director of religious exploration at UUTC here. So they are our panel. I'm going to open with a few remarks about children and resilience, so we're kind of all on the same page. And then I'm going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to share their thoughts and experiences about children's literature, resilience, and social justice. And after that, we'll open it up to questions and discussion by the panel. If you're watching online, you can put your questions in the chat and they will pass them to me so we can answer them that way. So, resilience. Resilience is the ability to cope with adversity and to rebound from hardship and trauma. Sometimes the hardship and trauma comes from neglect or abuse, but sometimes it comes from poverty, bullying, and racism. Homes, schools, and the wider community can foster resilience by providing protective factors to our children. These protective factors include meaningful relationships with caring adults, high expectations, and support to reach those goals. Opportunities to be strong, responsible members of their communities, at home, at school, in the neighborhood. Feeling competent and confident in their abilities and feeling connected to their communities is protective. And learning to cope with stress and believe that their decisions and actions give them some control over what happens to them. Having agency is very protective, feeling like things just aren't being done to you. Children's literature tells stories about children, lots of different kinds of children, who have faced challenges, figured out problems, formed strong relationships. Children and teens can learn coping skills by reading literature about resilience-building experiences and skills. making friends, solving problems, planning, making choices, setting boundaries, taking opportunities to help others. So let's hear from our panelists. Laura, would you like to start, please?
Okay. I began teaching in 1988, working with special education students, a variety of disabilities, behavior, learning disabilities. Some of the children were on the spectrum. So I was looking at a lot of different ways to approach learning with the kids. And a lot of times, especially with the younger ones, when you would pull out a book, the first thing they would say is, I can't read. I don't want to read that, you know. And when you supported them and gave them the tools they needed to read, it was amazing to see the change in their face, the change in their attitude. And working at Rise and Shine the last 5 years with mostly minority students coming from impoverished homes, a lot of family situations that you and I would cringe at if we knew what was going on. These kids a lot of times come in feeling defeated. There's things that go on the night before that kind of beat them down, and they'll come in just down and not feeling good about themselves. And we have reading every day. Every scholar reads for 20 minutes with a tutor, one-on-one. And the difference that you can see when they start talking about that book and the characters in the book. And we try to provide a lot of books that have people of all colors and races and ethnic backgrounds. And our summer program is the Freedom School program, and that's through the Children's Defense Fund. And the purpose of the Freedom School program is to give children a healthy start, a head start, a fair start, a safe start, and a moral start in life. And the literature that they provide us through that program is all centered around current issues that children face on a daily basis. And through reading those books, they are learning things, tools that they can use in their own lives. And I just think reading can take you wherever you want to go and allow you to do anything that you want to do just by experiencing the word on the page. And I'm old-fashioned. I want that book in front of me. I'm not a Kindle reader, and not many of our scholars at Rise and Shine like books on the computer. They would prefer to have the book, and that does my heart good. But I've seen what literature can do and help them understanding different situations.
Thank you, Laura. Betsy?
Hi, I'm Betsy Burrows, and currently I'm the Director of Teacher Education at Brevard College. I'm also an English teacher and began my career in 1984 teaching high school English. I'll start with a little story about why I became a high school English teacher, because I think it will come back around to this topic of the importance of books and the importance of literature in our lives. When I was a voracious reader as a child, I just read a lot. My parents, neither one had gone to college, but they were readers too. So it was just part of what we did, we read. And so if being a reader, and statistics support this, I did pretty well in school. And the correlation, I could understand, I could read well, I enjoyed reading, and so it made school very easy for me. And so when you do well in school and you get to go to college, then you have to decide what you want to do. So I was at my college and deciding, what do I want to do with my life? And you get this the culture tells us, well, if you're a smart kid, you really ought to go into medicine, right? So I had this, that's what I was supposed to do, go into medicine. And I was taking these freshman biology and chemistry courses, and because I worked hard and could focus, again, a gift from reading, to be able to focus well, I did okay in them, but I really loved my English classes, and I loved reading. So we had to choose our major. I went to my advisor, who was also English professor, just by chance, and I said, well, I guess I'm going to be pre-med. And he said, well, you don't seem really excited about that, Betsy. What's that about? You really should major in what you love. And I said, well, I have this gift to be here at college, and I have to give back, and the best way to give back is to be a doctor, because then you heal people, right? And that's really important to me, to give back. It's a calling. He said, well, but there's other ways to give back, aren't there? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, what do you like to do? And I said, I love my English classes. I love to read. And he said, you know, you could be an English teacher and introduce kids to books, and medical doctors heal the body, but teachers and books heal the mind and the heart. So you can still be a healer, Betsy. So he gave me permission to say, I want to be an English teacher. And so when I think about that, I really think sometimes I worry about our society doesn't realize the importance of teachers. Won't go into that all tonight, maybe a little bit, but the importance of reading. And it seems to me reading really builds resilience. It is therapeutic. We talk about reading as reading books, and particularly fiction, as mirrors or windows. And think for children, and as we're growing up, I mean, the most important questions are, who are we and where do we fit in? And books tell us this, thus the importance of diverse books, because we have diverse children, so they see themselves in those books, right? And can imagine different ways of who they can be and what they can be. And then we think of books as windows into a broader world. And I think we have a lot of young people in this country in poverty. And I think what poverty really is it's not just the absence of money in your life, but it's what the experiences that you lack, because the experiences of time, the experiences that money can give you. So it's a really small world in poverty unless you have books that are windows that take you, imagine a better way, give you hope, take you to a different environment. And so thank you, I guess, Alice, for having us talk about what I think is one of the most important issues we have in this country right now, the importance of literacy, if we really care about our young people, and keeping literacy, both print, which is important, and digital, which are important, alive.
Thank you, Betsy. Amen. ERIKA?
My name is ERIKA Brock. I'm the Youth Services Librarian at Transylvania County Library. And I'm so glad you brought up the windows and mirrors, because that was one of the things that I was thinking about as, preparing for this evening, and that whole concept of being able to see yourself in books. And I think it's so important for children and teens to be able to see themselves, get that self-affirmation, and on the flip side, windows, and being able to step into other people's shoes, and that can really help build empathy and understanding, and so that's very important. I help, I'm pretty much the one who develops the collection for Transylvania County Library in the youth services area, and I've been pleased to see that there's more and more diverse books being available to help represent all sorts of folks out there, to help, again, those windows and mirrors. The library really does strive to have an inclusive collection to support or to show many different experiences, whether it be religious, books about people of color, LGBTQIA+, and so on. So we really try to create those collections. We also have a Spanish language collection for youth, in addition to many bilingual books in Spanish as well. The library is part of a large consortium of North Carolina libraries called NC Cardinal. That's something that we switched to in the last couple of years, and it's been really great to be able to, not only have access to our collection, but even more titles through that consortium. So we really have access to a lot more than what we have just here. And if you're curious about how to find books, you can go online to our catalog. So you can search by title, you can try to search by keywords. I do know that there's a lot of concepts out there that are not necessarily easy to search by keywords, and so any of our staff are happy to help with that. I do see parents come in and ask for books about certain topics, divorce, loss of a loved one, including pets. Race, and how do I talk to my child about race and racism. And we do have a variety of those books, and books are just such a great conversation starter for a lot of different topics. And I hope that by building a diverse collection, that parents will continue to recognize that books not only help build literacy skills, but also resilience and empathy.
Thank you, ERIKA. Kevin?
All right. Thanks for having this panel, Alice. My name is Kevin LAUSCH. I run the Children's and Youth Program here at the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County. And I've also worked with kids in youth director position at a church and also through running camps and retreats. And here at the UUTC, we've been running a graphic novel book club for middle school and high schoolers, and I have to echo what the other panelists said, that the ability both to see themselves on the page but also see others, and particularly with youth who are thinking about their identity, who am I, what do I believe, and also how am I presenting myself, what is my true self, and who am I attracted to, and how can I say that to the world. I think it's really important to have a number of different books that can give them a window into themselves so that they can see somebody on the written page, whether it's a graphic novel or young adult literature, and they can see that person going through some of the struggles they're having with defining themselves, the struggles with letting other people in their world know about it, whether it's friends or their family or community, and how they can present themselves to the world and hopefully find acceptance. And if they don't find acceptance right away, how do they bounce back or be buoyant in it so they can live their true lives and their authentic identity. And so I think just getting books anytime, getting kids anytime to pick up a book and read a little bit or read a lot is really a success. So hope everybody out there tries that with their own kids in their lives.
What kind of experience do you guys have with graphic novels? Do they appeal more to kids these days, or what's your feeling?
Very popular at the library.
Yes. They will look inside, and if it's a graphic novel, even if it's this thick, they will take it over a book that's regular.
And we started a graphic novel club here basically to set the bar lower for these middle school and high school teens to be reading, and they sort of forget they're learning about social values and about being a good citizen as they're going through both some nonfiction and fiction books, just because the words on the page match with these amazing pictures, and usually very popular.
Yeah, I remember my first graphic novel, actually, I'm going to say it was a graphic novel, was in when I came and taught at Brevard High School, and I was teaching Macbeth, and I had like 5 levels of classes, which I shouldn't have, but I had an AP and honors level 3, 2, and 1. And so I came in, and the level 1s were doing pretty boring vocabulary, and everybody else was getting to read Macbeth, which has a lot about murder and violence and ambition and good versus evil and all those things we care about. And so I came in the middle of the year when I first taught here. And so I looked at the level ones and I said, well, would you like to read Macbeth? Every other 12th grader is. And they said, well, it's too hard for us, you know. We can't read that, Miss Burroughs. It's much too hard for us. And I said, I don't think so. I think you will understand the themes really well. And so my first graphic novel was the comic book, Macbeth. They had the classic comic books. And so they read it, and we acted out scenes. And I can tell you, my level ones understood Macbeth and some of the themes Shakespeare was talking about just as well as my APs who were reading the actual modern Shakespeare English. And so now when I teach my young adult literature course at the college, the graphic novels are the most, I think, popular 2 weeks. It's amazing the quality of literature. And I do think we are becoming more visual, but that pairing of words with the visuals, you're triggering two parts of the brain, understanding ideas coming through. So I think they're very a wonderful kind of evolution of literature. I mean, I hope I'm a Henry James fan and I'm a Faulkner fan, so I hope those books aren't going to go away. But I think these graphic novels appeal to kids and help them even branch out to saying reading's good and then going to other types of novels. So yes, graphic novels are the way to go.
Exactly, and I think that if we can get kids interested in reading, graphic novels, whatever it might be, that's so important. If we can get them hooked, if that's the way we're doing it, then that's great. That just sets maybe the tone, hopefully, for the rest of their school years, school success, and they're wanting to learn more as they grow up. So.
What are the graphic novels that you were using here with your middle school students?
Here we started with March by John Lewis, the civil rights icon and congressman. And that was a good introduction just into the civil rights movement for the youth. And we've also used some by Molly Knox Ostertag. She's written the Witch Boy trilogy, which is about a young man born into a magical family, but he doesn't have the magical powers all the men in his family have. He more has the ones that the women do. And it's just a nice narrative about gender and being your true self. And we've also used a few others about refugees and also The Girl from the Sea, which is about same-sex love.
That's fabulous.
Good.
Yeah. Do any of y'all have questions? Yes, Jim. Can I get your mic? Yes, you can.
Thank you. First of all, this topic is dear to my heart, my wife's heart. We're both career teachers. I taught high school English. I started in 1964 and retired in 1997. And so I saw some things change, but nothing like they've changed in the last 30 years. And I'm reading a book right now by Johan Hari called Stolen Focus. And it's about how social media is designed to keep us attached to a screen. And of course, there's a financial incentive for the companies to do that. And a few statistics. The average adult reads a book for 17 minutes a day and watches a screen for 5.4 hours. The average high school student is able to focus on one thing for 65 seconds. The average adult is able to focus for 3 minutes before they change focus. 57% of adults in this country now do not read a single book in a year. So the question is this to each of you. What do you see in the students that you interact with that would bear this out, and how do you deal with it?
Great question.
I work with the majority of our scholars at Rise and Shine or elementary, and they don't spend quite as much time with the screens as our middle and high school kids do. They do tend to go towards the books. I hope that'll last a little while, but our older kids are on those screens, and that's what we're struggling with right now, trying to get them off the screen when they're at Rise and Shine, other than working on their homework, which is a big focus at Rise and Shine. But we're trying to get them to help us and think of activities that they would like to do, and other things besides the screen. And they can't, the only idea they have is they might want to cook. And of course that's so they can eat what they cook. But it's very sad to me that they have no other interests. TikTok and Instagram and, those kinds of things. And it just breaks my heart, because there's so much more out there that we could expose them to, and they're really fighting us on letting go of that. And we're struggling to get that done.
Yeah, we are struggling at college level too, and I brought the most important book that I've read this year about this. What you're saying, those statistics are backed up by our neuroscientists, right? Who can now do, in the last 10 years, brain imaging. And this is an amazing book. It's Reader Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital Age. And Marianne Wolf is, her son's dyslexic, by the way, and she loves reading. You'll love the book. You've got to read it. It has lots of literary passages in it. But she loves literature. She's also a neuroscientist. And so they're studying how does our brain changing because of screen time. And I'll read a quote. I came prepared with a quote because, with college teachers here. This is from Marianne Wolf. It speaks to what you're saying. And she has a little bit of an answer for this too. It's hard work, but it's an answer. Reading reflects our medium, and to the extent that a digital medium is going to require us to process large amounts of information very quickly, it will diminish from the time we have for slower processing work. And those slower processes are deep learning, the ones that are more cognitively challenging. They are the basis for going beyond the initial short circuit of decoding the information and understanding it at a very basic level. The digital medium rewards and advantages fast processes at the cost of the slower processes that build our very important critical, analytical, and empathetic, which is what ERIKA has mentioned several times, empathy processes. And the research from our brain scientists say deep reading, we can say this scientifically, fosters empathy, imagination, critical thinking, and self-reflection in a way digital reading does not. And that's pretty conclusive. Those of us who feel it as teachers and parents and grandparents, sometimes I just keep thinking, God, am I just getting old? Am I just getting the old way, that Socrates said, the young people are going to pot then. But no, something has changed, and our scientists are backing that up. She proposes at the end, which is a lot of work for us teachers and parents and grandparents, that we have to very intentionally keep our kids reading print. Sometimes we've gone off print because of environmental reasons, and we have these amazing screens. We have to have a biliterate brain now. We work with kids and teach them to read digitally and how to do that well, because they do it kind of poorly unless they have teachers to help. But we keep the print reading alive as well, and because it works a different part of the brain. And we as humans can't lose those things like empathy and reflection at the expense of fastness. So get this wonderful book.
Well, and I see just that. This afternoon, I was reading with some 5th and 6th graders a short book about somebody that was being bullied. And when I was asking these leading questions about, how do you think the character feels, and they had no way to relate to that. They just were telling me what was happening in the story. And I see, sadly, and I don't know, there could be a lot of factors that feed into this, but I see children today don't have a lot of empathy or understanding or patience for those around them. And in many cases don't have respect for other humans around them. It's like they don't see how their actions affect other people. And that's alarming to me. And so that's one of the things we talk about at Rise and Shine. I mean, we're not just there as an academic resource. We talk about respect and helping others and all the things, the life skills that we need to be successful adults in our communities and productive adults. And, sometimes when we interact with the parents, we see where it comes from. And we've started, having parent trainings, trying to help them understand too. And like with the screen time, we've talked a lot with the parents about screen time and what their kids are watching. And they really did not know about some of the things that the kids were talking about on a daily basis. And so I think, we've got to help everyone understand the digital world and what it's doing. There's just so much to be talked about. And literature can open the world to a child that lives in little old Brevard. They can learn about anything. And we've got to provide that literature for them.
And my hope for seeing all of these new diverse books become more available and accessible, that hopefully, that will happen, and also that, children and teens will see more of themselves in books, and again, kind of stoke that interest in reading and perhaps be like, oh, there are books here that are about me or that are talking about what I'm going through, and maybe that will encourage them to read more. At least that's my hope.
And I would say the same thing, something that can hopefully move them emotionally, that will draw them in to want to read, and something that might help them to get a sense of acceptance of themselves if they're struggling with that. It would help a lot, and wanting them to then continue to know what's in that story and keep reading.
One of the things that's kind of frightening about that is if you have populations of children who are often disadvantaged in our society or who are targeted in our society, who, because they're not getting that deep reading and those concepts, they are even less able to safely navigate the world, was what occurred to me when I was listening to y'all. And, not just kids of color, but also kids who live in LGBTQ families or are LGBTQ, or, you know, kids who are in an immigrant family or a refugee family. You know, they really, you kind of have to be on your toes to kind of stay safe and navigate, and that's kind of scary. Yeah. Any other questions from Bill?
Number one, I wish open anyway. Give a little more, a better explanation of graphic novels, because at my age, when I first started on graphic literature from children, I think of pornography. That's what it is, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
The other thing, I have lots of questions because I'm dumb. What do you think about blind children that are not taught?
Braille.
Oh, God. See,
Braille.
What my brain is like.
Right, Braille.
And literature.
Right.
And that children are not taught even penmanship anymore. They don't know how to read. They don't, I mean, they're not exposed, they're not brought up to be able to look after themselves and read the right things, or be curious enough to not just depend on all this electronics.
Yeah.
You can tell what I think.
Well, you know, if you're curious, you actually can, there's a lot to look at on the internet if you're curious, but that's not necessary. So would,
My choice.
ERIKA, could you give us a definition of a graphic novel or graphic literature for Bill?
Just a little bit more
Yeah.
nuanced.
So simply, it's kind of like a longer comic. It's like a comic book, but in a novel format.
Classics that somebody mentioned a while ago, when back in the last millennium, when I was in school,
Yeah.
you know, more from the middle of the last millennium backward as
Yeah.
opposed to forward.
So it's more like a comic book.
Kind of, yes. It's and as Betsy said, that it's really more than just a comic book. I mean, it really is literature. Graphic novels have really evolved. There's a lot of award winners out there that have come out recently, and do you have any
I
more
would
expansion on that?
suggest that when you leave, there are 4 tables out there, and we all have graphic novels examples to just pick one up and really look through it. And again, they're amazing literature, great literature, words and pictures, but they both work, the visuals and the print work together to tell the story. So these are good for kids, I would say.
I did see one that sex was in very large letters on the front of the book, which gets, no matter how young you are, that gets your attention.
Yes, it,
So how much, are those, I'm gonna look for that book when this is over.
That's not on my table. Well, it should be, yeah. Again, I mean, and if you look, I mean, that's a health issue we have to talk to our kids about, right?
Do they use the correct word for parts of the body and teach children that have never heard the right way to talk about it
Well,
in public?
I can speak to that. There are several excellent books out there, including one book called Sex is a Funny Word,
That's the one I saw.
that
Go for it.
these graphic novels / sort of comic books use the text and the visuals to try and teach about not a narrative so much as about the body itself. And so part of that education is teaching the kids the correct scientific words for body parts and for processes of the body. And that's one way to sort of get your kids into reading too, if you get some books that have good visuals in it that you would like them to learn something about, and you can give it to the child to look at. You can leave it lying around your house. And we do this with our health and sexuality program that we run here called Our Whole Lives, We leave books around during the program just for the teens to pick up and look at. And if the subject matter interests them, such as sex and how your body works, they'll pick it up and flip through it. And if you leave a book lying around your house for your child, they will most likely pick it up, flip through it, put it down, pick it up later, flip through it again, and that can be a process that happens over months or years to get them to read the material.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah. Alice, did you have a question?
People, when they're listening to this online, they can't hear the questions.
Mine is not exactly, well, it is a question. In fact, you all led me into this. It was just a great entry. The books that children should be reading, whether it be literary classics or whether it be parts of the body, there's a great movement in some states to ban, absolutely strip libraries, more so school libraries than public libraries. I'm happy to know, having a close relationship to our Transylvania County system, our Transylvania Library County system, that we haven't had to face that. And I'm not sure, but I think that's probably true of the school system as well. But how do you fight that? How do we, who really want to help children and introduce them to all kinds of things? And some of the books that are being banned, that are being ripped off shelves, are classics. I'd like to hear some of your comments on that.
Thank you, Alice.
I'll go ahead and just speak up first. One way to combat it is to let kids, youth, teens know that these books are being banned or taken off shelves, and say there are people out in the world who fear ideas and don't want ideas. But I would argue that ideas are never dangerous. It's what you do with them that is. And so let these kids know there are people who would like you to not read these books. Most likely the kids will then want to read them.
Very, that's right. Yeah.
Other thoughts?
Just to know, you're correct. As you know, as far as I know, we have not had any challenges for banned books at the Transylvania County Library. Libraries, all books in the library are optional reads. Nobody is telling anybody else what to read. You can pick it up of your own volition. And libraries do have a responsibility to provide a wide range of viewpoints and perspectives. And inclusion of certain materials in the library does not mean that it's necessarily an endorsement of that viewpoint. And neither is checking out a book. Again, we talked about windows and mirrors. People check a book out because they agree with that viewpoint. Others check that book out because they might not necessarily agree with it, but they want to learn more about it. And so we have a responsibility to provide those viewpoints for everyone.
Wow, yeah, it is very scary. I think it's important to realize that it's fear. It's also politicized, the way they politicized education. It's not, and that's scary. And that ideas, you can't be scared of them. And when you start, then you start losing your democracy. And so it is a difficult time. I mean, I think American culture has had this, and German culture, we know book burning. But it's usually more about politics and somebody's reach for power. Also, this question is a little bit off, but it goes, I also think it sounds to me what parents and people let their children watch and listen to uncensored, and then complain about a book that's usually being taught by adults in a classroom, and an adult who is trained and educated to present these discussions and cares about viewpoints and to help children understand difficult things. That amazes me, how we've got there, and that parents that complain about books, and some of the books that have the most values and are teaching values and morals. To Kill a Mockingbird. It's always amazing, the books that are being banned. You thought, wow, that's one of the most, and how we underestimate our children and how all, at a very young age, are searching for what is, how to be a good person and what is good versus evil. And that's our job as parents and teachers, to help explore this, and some of find the literature that does. I also find it fascinating, the difference between books and visuals. And I don't know if Alice remembers this, but I had a pretty precocious reader, my daughter, and I think she was like in 4th and 5th grade. She said, you know, I'm going to the library and take out every Stephen King book there is, and that's all I'm going to do this summer. And I said, oh no, she's going to be demented. You know, Stephen King is a pretty good writer, and he has, in many ways, but it's like, I don't want my daughter. That's kind of dark and deep. And Alex said, Betsy, do you remember that? It's okay. Let her read what she wants. You know, and she read a lot for the first week, and then she said, okay, I got it. It's okay. I think I'm going to go out and play now. So good advice from a child psychologist. I also think children, when they're reading, you can only imagine what you know. This is another interesting story about my daughter, because this is a book I really would not want her to read. She was in like 7th grade, and we were sitting, she said, oh, I'm reading Lolita. I said, what? And Lolita's a classic, but Lolita it's not a book I'd give a child, especially in the 7th grade. It's about an older man and his preoccupation with a girl. I'm like, she didn't get any of it because it wasn't part of what she was ready to read yet, right? So I had no fear. She read it, and I said, so what do you think this is about? You know, because I'm like, this is pedophilia, about that. And she said, oh, I don't know. It's just some strange man, and I didn't. Now, she read that when she was ready to read that, she would understand some of the deeper questions. So again, I don't worry about books, because I think you only bring to it what you know as much, and there's a lot of research on this, as the visual things we put in front of kids, and then they're processing somebody else's, and so they have to take it in. That's much more scary. The book can only be what your mind is ready for. So that's something I think about too.
That is really good, Betsy. That's really good. I read Catch-22 when I was like 11, and my mother's deal was, you can read anything you want, because if it's too hard, if it's too old for you, you won't understand it. And sure enough, you know, I didn't understand it. And then when I read it again in high school, I was like, oh, you know, didn't understand it when I was 11. We do have a question from online. Will someone have a transcript of this talk? It will be archived on YouTube, is my understanding. So you can watch it again on YouTube. Is there a reference list for the book titles recommended and mentioned? We could, yeah, we can probably make one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the question. Wait a minute, anybody over here first? No? Okay, Jim. Looks like we have 10 minutes left.
You talked earlier about empathy, and years and years ago, Marshall McLuhan made a statement that the medium is the message. And back to Stolen Focus, the book I mentioned before, he talks about how actually, and I never understood that term or that statement until I read this book, and it is that the way we receive information actually shapes our view of the world. And to give you an example, and you're talking about empathy, and he talks about reading fiction specifically, that people who read fiction tend to be more empathetic because they have the opportunity to get inside maybe one, maybe many people's heads and understand what makes them tick and how they feel and so on. I grew up with radio, and I grew up before people had a television in their house. And we got our first television when I think I was 9 years old. And listening to a radio program, The Lone Ranger, for example, you could picture, you could hear that voice, but you could picture in your head, same way you do when you read. And then television came along, and it took away some of that creative piece, if you will. Go to Twitter, and that Twitter now gives people the impression that the entire experience or world can be captured in 280 characters, that there is a quick and simple answer to everything, and if there's not, it's not worth paying attention to. And I think that's a real danger here, and I think that's much of what's responsible for what we're dealing with in this country right now.
Thank you. In the last few minutes, why don't we we've talked about lots of different kinds of justice, I think, and we've talked about different kinds of equity. One of the things I'm interested in when it comes to children's literature is there is like when you're talking about the library, ERIKA, and you want to make the library a place that is open and comfortable for a very diverse group of people. So sometimes people say, well, we need to have all kind of books about Black people or about civil rights or about, Mexico but then I always wonder, why don't we ask those people, what would you like to check out of the library? So sometimes what we're thinking about is what white people should be reading about diverse people so that they can learn and be more empathetic. But then I'm thinking, gosh, if I was a Black person and I went to the library, what would, it would be nice to know what they would like to read and check out and what kind of DVDs they'd like to have or what kind of movies or, it's a different way of looking at it. Have you ever thought about that?
Yes, we have thought about that, and there's a team at the library that's talking about things along those lines. We have reached out to some various groups, and even just by conversations we have in the library, asking people, or let me give you an example. A teenager came in asking for, a book on a certain genre perhaps, and by me giving them a variety, not assuming that this is the kind of book that they want, giving them a variety of choices, it then came out that, they were really into LGBTQ books, and so it was like, okay, we figured that out by giving a variety of choices, and so we're gonna go down this path too. And so really just trying to be as open as we can when we're talking to individuals will help us get that
Being careful
sense.
of your assumptions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Laura, do you? Yeah, go ahead.
We have wonderful, wonderful tutors and community support at Rise and Shine, and it seems like all the time people are purchasing books with African American characters and donating them to us, and we're very appreciative of that. But I got to watching when the children choose books to read with their tutors. They don't necessarily choose those books. In fact, some of those books, I don't know if they've been read at all, other than by me. And I thought that was a little unusual. I don't know why I thought it was unusual, but I don't know. I just thought, well, I would think they would want to read those.
Maybe the subject matter wasn't
Maybe,
interesting, or maybe
maybe.
it was a boring book, or, you know,
Yeah, I don't know how they knew about it, or, of course, they are in the libraries at school, and so they may have read it at school already. I don't know, but they do not, as a rule, choose them.
that's interesting. It's interesting. We have looks like about 5 minutes left. You guys want to make kind of a final statement about books and resilience, or books and social justice?
There's an awful lot of great books out there, so just go and look. We have a wonderful library in our community, and so just go and look and find something.
Yeah, and you know, at one point, I know ERIKA made a list of more diverse kind of books that there are in the collection. So there is actually a list. The library was working with the NAACP for a list. So really, you could
And
go
we're
to...
adding more all the time.
Right, right. So you could actually just go talk to ERIKA and say, this, yeah, kind of books I'm looking at.
And I guess my message to adults out there would be, if you know of a child who's dealing with some situation that may be troubling to them, whether it be an illness of a grandparent, or the loss of a pet, or their sexuality, do your research as an adult and find a book and go to them and share that book together and help them digest and help them delve into it. Kids a lot of times will read it on the surface, but they don't always stop and think about what they're reading and what the character was feeling, unless you're there to guide them. We've been talking about wanting our kids to be thinkers, not just doers. They'll say, I've read that book, but did they really read the book and digest the book? And maybe that's what's happening with some of the books we have. They just don't digest them and see what goodness there is in there and how it can be very helpful in their lives.
I think I would go off what Laura said. I think most of us as parents or teachers and who love young people and grandparents, we want them to be successful. If they ask me, from what I know from raising my own kids and from being a teacher, there's the two things that any of us can be, no matter your social, economic, or any of us can do. One, and there's pretty good correlation. The only thing that correlates with success in life and success in school, one of the things is, did you eat dinner with your parents and sit or family gatherings and sit and talk without any devices? You just look at them and ask them and get them to talk. And one great way to do that is, I think, through what are you reading, and let me share what I'm reading, what are my ideas. And then just one thing, have your child read. And I think a lot of that is about what they see an example. I really think it's the best education. I can name you many writers, many from poor backgrounds, who just lived in the library, and the ideas from August Wilson to James Baldwin. But reading really does change more than anything I know, and open up possibilities, and also that mirror of, I'm not so different. You can find books that relate to you no matter how different you feel in a small town, in a homogeneous place. So thank you for an amazing library we have here that anybody can walk in, any child, any age. That's just probably the most valuable thing in this community that figuratively, and I would say even probably literally, has saved lives, are the books that we have, and they don't cost a thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I just wanted to say, there's nothing that excites me more than seeing a kid happily, coming back to the library in the children's area to get a book. And, it's even better when they stop to tell you about a book that they really enjoyed. And it's just that joy that I, hope to see on every child's face that comes back to the youth services area of the library.
Yeah, and I just think it's really, and I do think it's really helpful to children to be able to find books that relate to them and their situation and their ethnicity and their everything. Even if they don't always want them, I think it's really important for kids to be able to
see
find diverse options where they can see themselves. I love the idea of the mirror in the window. I love that. That's really great. So, thank you everybody for coming. And thank you everybody online. And panelists, you were wonderful. And I really appreciate you coming out tonight to do our program. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.